Welcome to Walking by Faith, a podcast from Torch Trust where we talk to blind and partially sighted people about how their lived experience of being visually impaired has impacted their faith and spiritual lives. I'm your host, Lynn Davis.
I'm Brian Anderson. As you say, I'm a relatively newly appointed trustee to Torch Trust. I live in the East Midlands. I live very close to the Torch office, actually, and I've been a Christian for a few years now. I got a background in education. I was a teacher and an education officer, and now I'm retired and looking for things to do to fill my time. I enjoy being outside. My wife and I both enjoy walking. We have the guide dog who keeps us busy, and generally that's me. I just like the outdoors and I like being active.
How and when did you lose your sight?
I was actually born with cataracts, and in the early 1950s, cataract operations in children weren't carried out routinely. So for the first few years of my life, I had very little vision, and in fact, I have no visual memories. I was operated on at about the age of 6, and the vision was restored. But by that time, of course, lots of damage had been done to my optic nerves. So I have a thing called nystagmus, which makes my eyes wobble about a bit, and I've got extremely high myopia. I have good light and dark perception. I can see shapes and colours. And because I had some surgery later in life, I've also got the ability to I can use magnifiers and things very close up. So I can actually focus on text if it's 30, the fixed vision is at about 30 centimeters. So I have handheld magnifiers that I use a lot. And obviously I use technology a lot to help me. So I do, although I am registered blind because I simply can't see any of the eye charts and the other tests they do, I do actually have sufficient vision to be very helpful for mobility and for getting about safely.
How and when did you become a Christian?
In 2002, I was doing quite well. I was, as I say, I was a teacher. I'd been a teacher, and a few years before that, I got a really good job as an education officer. And I was living up in the northeast, but I had a national job, a job that had national responsibilities. My wife at the time was just training to be a teacher, beginning her teacher training, and I had two grown-up boys, well, almost grown-up boys at the end of their school careers, and we were doing very well. We were having a nice life, and we were sort of quite happy and content. And then in 2002, March 2002, my first wife died suddenly. And of course, that turned my world upside down to some extent. I went through lots of the grieving that would naturally go with that. And of course, it meant that I could no longer carry out the duties of my job. So I had to give the job up. It obviously impacted on the boys as well, because they were both one doing GCSEs and the other doing A levels. And it had a real upset in the family. And I was in a very lost place. And then, but for a couple of years, I was very drifting and feeling very unhappy, very sad. And then I went on holiday to the Lake District, just as a last minute thing. I just needed to get away from home. And I went to the Lake District and I met someone who was clearly a Christian. And we got on quite well. We started to speak to each other regularly over the phone. And she recommended that I should do an Alpha course. So I signed up for an Alpha course and followed it through. And I have to say, I was quite uncomfortable doing the Alpha course. It challenged me incredibly to know how great God was and how sinful I was and how much my life was lost without putting my faith in the Lord. And during the course of the Alpha course, I rebelled to some extent. And after the away day, I felt real pressure to come forward and make some sort of declaration of faith, and I couldn't do it. But later, almost the same day as that, I found myself in the garden just praying, and on my own, and not not making any show of it. I was just sitting and praying and asking God to forgive me and to accept me into his family. And that's the point at which I think I truly became a Christian.
How has your faith impacted your lived experience of being visually impaired?
Up until the point when I did actually become a Christian, I don't think I think I just coped with my sight loss. I was brought up in the northeast in what you describe as a relatively poor, depressed area of the country, and nobody really made very much fuss of a child with sight loss. It wasn't. It was just one of those things. You got on with it. It was something else that happened in the family. So nobody ever really told me that I was visually impaired. So I got on with just doing things as I needed to. I did go away to a special school, but again, very few concessions were made really to meet any additional needs. So I up until sort of early 2000s, I just ticked over. And then after that, I think I began to think, if there is a great God in heaven who's got plans for me, why do his plans really involve me not being able to see anything? I was struggling to live with sight loss. And then I turned it round and started to consider it. And really, I thought, well, my sight loss is part of God's great plan for me. He obviously has a purpose in it. And in fact, looking at it from another angle, having been brought up in the northeast in this very poor area, my life would have been very different had I not had sight loss. I would have followed my father or my uncles into heavy industry. I would have had probably lived the culture that was prevalent at the time, where it was a heavy drinking, sort of working class background. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just wouldn't suit the person I found myself to be at that time. And I sort of began to think, well, God obviously has a plan for me. And my sight loss is part of who I am. And so there must be a purpose in it. And I think I just live my life thinking along those lines that, if I can use my sight loss, or even if the way I conduct myself and the way I deal with the problems that sight loss brings to me, perhaps that is a witness to other people.
And how has being visually impaired impacted your experience of church?
In many ways, I've been very fortunate in my experiences of church. I've never really had a problem getting access to materials in church. I've been to churches where having large print and things available just was second nature. It was expected. People just handed them out. I've been in other churches where they were more than willing to send me things, send me information, or the order of service in electronic format so I could access it on my tablet. My present church produces large print for me. It produces Braille. Our secretary sends me everything I need, again, in electronic format, so it's all available to me. So practically, my experience of churches has been good. I think and I possibly share this with a number of other visually impaired people, I think where the issues arise in churches is other people's attitudes to people with visual impairment, and a willingness to include us or see us as being the same as other people, not something different. And I think this side of heaven, there isn't a perfect church, and churches are full of people, and people like to be with people who are like them. So, the young parents stick together. Those who've got an interest in rugby will stick together. And it's very difficult sometimes to break into friendship groups or to get involved with other people when you can't do the simple things that people expect, like make eye contact and recognize people across a room. So I think sometimes people think I'm a little bit aloof, I'm a little bit distant from other people, or even hard to approach because they don't get the responses from me that they might naturally expect from other people. But generally speaking, I fitted into church life. I do try to serve where I can. I like to feel that I have a real friendship group, and I have a fellowship that I'm truly a real part of.
Who has supported you through your faith journey?
I again have been very fortunate in coming across some very godly people during my Christian journey. Through this journey, I've had elders who have been so Christ-like in their attitude, in their willingness to share the gospel with me, to help me to understand the things that were difficult. I've been in churches where the teaching has been absolutely wonderful, where it's really challenged me, where people haven't been afraid to remind me of the sin that is in my life, and that I am not free from sin, but I have a God who's so great that he will forgive me when I fail. But most of all, I think I'd have to say my wife, Sue, has been the greatest influence. She was the person I met when on holiday. She suggested the Alpha course. I was aware that she lived hundreds of miles away from me at the time, and I was aware that she was praying for me, that people she knew were praying for me. And she's been a wonderful support, and she still is. We share our daily readings, we discuss our church services, and she's a real encouragement to me as a more mature Christian than I am.
How has your unique experience impacted the way you see God and experience God's love?
I feel that whatever situation I'm in, and however difficult things seem to be, that God is watching over me, that he is, he's that guide by my side that I can't see. He's there 24/7. Unlike, worldly friends, God won't let me down or fail me. I may fail him on numerous occasions and let him down, but he will never turn his back on me or walk away from me. So when things are tough, when things are rough, I have a God I can call on and ask for help. And when things are going well, I also have a God I can speak to and say, thank you, God. That's my life is fulfilled and full with you.
What does walking by faith mean to you?
It means that when we come across things in life that we stumble over, things that challenge us, things that are difficult, again, it's very much the same as I said earlier, that I know that God is with me all the time, that whatever happens, whatever the journey is, whether I feel lonely, whether I feel sad, whether things are going my way or not, that God will never walk away from me. He'll never turn his back on me, because I know where I'm going eventually, because Jesus said that's where I'm going, and it's something that I needn't worry. Whatever the world throws at me, I still have this wonderful God in heaven, who and a saviour and a good shepherd and somebody who's prepared a way for me. So my path might sometimes be full of trips and stumbles, but the eventual goal is sure. I have that certainty of where I will go at the end of this life.
What's your wellness tip for our listeners? Is there an app or a devotion or an activity that you like to do that connects you to your faith and to God?
I like to be outside and to look at creation and just think, a friend of mine gave me a little tip the other day. We were talking about going to a museum that was all about geology and ecology and evolution and things. And he said, I went there and I took a little pad of post-it notes. And on each post-it note, I wrote, God did this, or God made that. And I stuck them on the exhibits in this exhibition. And I thought, what a wonderful idea. And I can look at outside and hear the birds singing and see the trees and things. And I can just think, God made that. And that's where I feel best. But just at the moment, I've been doing a study in our own church on the Psalms of Ascent. And Psalm 121 just sums things up for me. It's a real feeling in verses 1 and 2, where we talk about our personal relationship with God, this that we have a God who will never fail us. And then the rest of the psalm, where people pray, people sing it to each other to give each other a reassurance that you're not alone. You're walking in this journey with God by your side all the time, a guide at your right hand, someone who'll never let you down, someone who'll never fail you, and someone who will be with you through eternity. And I think that's the thing, that if I wanted to share something with other people, I say, please read Psalm 121 with someone else, and just know that it is for all of us. It's a psalm that brings us all together.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Walking by Faith. If you'd like to get in touch about anything you've heard on the podcast, or if you'd like to leave any comments or feedback, you may do so by phoning 01858 438 260 or by emailing info@torchtrust.org. We'll be back soon, but until then, from me, Lynn Davis, goodbye for now, and thanks for listening.